Piper Ellington's heart slammed against her ribs as the elevator jolted, lights flickered, and then nothing. Silence. Darkness. No movement. "Oh my God," she whispered, her palm pressing flat against the cool metal wall as she tried to breathe. "Hey," a voice said in the dark, calm and steady. "You okay?" She hadn't realized someone else was in the elevator. Her eyes adjusted just enough to make out the silhouette of a man sitting on the floor near the panel. His voice was warm, grounding. "I think so," Piper said, trying to keep her voice from cracking. "What just happened?" "Looks like the power's out. Probably a breaker issue or a grid overload. These old buildings aren't great with summer storms." She nodded, even though he couldn't see her. "Great. I'm supposed to be at a meeting in 10 minutes. Unless your meeting's in this elevator, you're out of luck," he said lightly. "Come sit. It's gonna be a while." Piper hesitated. Sitting on the floor of a stuck elevator wasn't exactly how she pictured her Wednesday at all, especially not wearing a silk blouse and heels. But the panic was crawling up her spine, and the man's voice, low and solid, was oddly soothing. She slowly slid down the wall, settling across from him. "I'm Piper. Atlas Monroe." His name echoed in her mind. Something about it felt strong, solid, like the kind of man who didn't rattle easily. "You sound annoyingly calm," she muttered, pulling her knees up. He chuckled. "I've dealt with worse. My 5-year-old once locked herself in the bathroom with peanut butter and a permanent marker." Piper blinked. "You're a dad?" He nodded. "Single dad. My daughter, Tessa, thinks I'm a superhero because I can tie ponytails and make pancakes." Piper smiled for the first time in the last 15 minutes. "That's impressive. She's the impressive one. Keeps me on my toes. You got kids?" She shook her head. "No, just me." She didn't mention the boardrooms, the private equity firms, the tech startup she sold last year for over $30 million. The Piper Ellington everyone read about online didn't exist in this elevator. And she liked it that way. "Where were you headed?" he asked. "Meeting. Midtown. I was supposed to pitch a venture fund project. Not that it matters now." Atlas tilted his head. "You in finance?" "Something like that," she said vaguely. He didn't push, just nodded like it made total sense. "What about you?" she asked. "I'm on my way to pick up Tessa from preschool. I do HVAC systems, my own small business. Mostly commercial contracts, but I fix a lot of old buildings like this one." "Wait, so you actually know how elevators work?" "I could probably get us out if I had tools and wasn't afraid of lawsuits," he joked. She laughed, surprising herself. "You're not panicking anymore," he said quietly. She looked up at him. "That's because you're talking to me." He gave a small smile. "Glad I could help." The silence stretched, but it wasn't awkward. It was warm, comfortable. She studied him now that her eyes had adjusted. He was handsome in a rugged, everyday way. Faint scruff on his jaw. Work boots. T-shirt that fit a little too well. The kind of man who didn't care about stock prices or luxury portfolios. The kind of man who fixed things with his hands, who showed up. The kind of man she hadn't met in a very long time. Suddenly, the lights flickered back on. The elevator shuddered and then began to move slowly upward. "Oh," Piper breathed. Atlas stood and offered his hand. She took it without hesitation, letting him pull her up. His grip was strong, warm, steady. When the doors opened, the lobby looked exactly the same as it had 20 minutes ago. But somehow, everything felt different. "Well," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Guess this is where we part ways." Piper hesitated. She didn't want to leave. Do you want to get coffee sometime?" He blinked, surprised. "You want to get coffee with me?" "Yeah, I do." He laughed, a little sheepish. "I was gonna ask you first, but I figured you were one of those high-powered types who wouldn't talk to a guy like me." "I am," she said, smiling. "But I also like coffee." He grinned. "There's a diner 2 blocks away. I usually go after picking up Tess. You free this afternoon?" She glanced down at her phone. 30 missed calls. Her assistant would have a meltdown. But she didn't care. "Yeah," she said. "I'm free." Piper never missed meetings. She never went off schedule. But that afternoon, she let herself sit in a booth with a man who made her laugh, and his daughter who offered her a crayon and called her pretty lady. Atlas was easy to talk to. He didn't care that her shoes cost more than his rent. He didn't ask what she did, or how much she made, or what her last name meant. With him, she could breathe. Over the next few weeks, they saw more of each other. Piper found herself looking forward to his texts asking if she wanted takeout or a walk in the park. Their lives were different, But when they were together, none of that mattered. Tessa adored her. Atlas made her feel seen in a way no one had in years. Still, Piper kept her world separate. Atlas didn't know she was a millionaire. Didn't know she owned part of the high-rise they got stuck in. Didn't know her name was plastered across Forbes' Women to Watch list. He thought she was just Piper, and she liked it that way. But secrets had a way of catching up to you. And Piper had no idea how much longer she could keep hers hidden. Piper leaned against the counter of a tiny hardware store off 6th Street, the hum of an old ceiling fan circling above her in lazy loops. The air smelled like sawdust and motor oil, and she couldn't remember the last time she'd stood in a place that didn't have sleek marble floors or that didn't play ambient jazz through hidden speakers. She glanced down at the small paper bag in her hand, electrical wire, an outlet tester, and a strangely shaped wrench Atlas had told her he needed for a job. She didn't need to be here. He hadn't even asked. But she'd offered to swing by and pick up the tools when he mentioned he was behind on a repair near the elementary school. "You sure you know what you're getting?" the cashier asked, eyeing her silk blouse with open skepticism. Piper smiled. "I'm not sure about anything except that a man with grease on his hands and a daughter who does cartwheels in the park asked me for this." The cashier gave her a slow nod, as if that explained everything. Outside, the heat hit her like a wall. She crossed the street toward the truck Atlas used for his jobs, its paint chipped along the bumper. The passenger door held shut with a stubborn click that required just the right amount of force and finesse. She'd learned the trick 3 days ago when he'd picked her up for a drive to the botanical gardens, where Tessa had insisted on naming every flower after Disney characters. He was kneeling beside a generator, sleeves rolled up, a pencil behind his ear, and a streak of dirt across one cheek. "Delivery," she called out. He looked up, surprised. "You actually went. I like a challenge." He stood and took the bag from her, glancing inside. "You got the right stuff. Don't sound so shocked. I'm just not used to women who know the difference between a flathead and a Phillips. I don't. I just listened." He laughed, tucking the wrench into his back pocket. "Well, thank you. This was going to delay me an hour." "Consider it a favor," she said, brushing a lock of hair behind her ear. "Or bribe. I want to see you tonight." He raised an eyebrow. "You're making the plans now?" "Only if you want to eat something that doesn't come in a paper bag. I like greasy food. I like candlelight." He wiped his hands with a rag. "You got a place in mind?" She hesitated. She did, but it was the kind of place where the waiters wore gloves and the wine list had its own leather-bound menu. Not the kind of place where Atlas would feel comfortable. Not yet. "There's an Italian place in Brooklyn. Not fancy, just great food." He nodded. "I can do that. I'll ask Marcy to keep Tess for the night." She tilted her head. "Marcy, the neighbor upstairs. Her grandson's in the same class as Tess. They're like siblings. She watches her sometimes when I've got late calls." Piper felt a sudden, sharp ache. His life was full of people who knew him, who helped him, who saw him exactly as he was. Her world was curated, polished, filtered. Even her friends were business associates or people who knew her through magazine profiles and gala introductions. "7 work for you?" he asked. She nodded quickly. "Perfect." That evening, the restaurant smelled like garlic and tomato, and the tables were covered in checkered cloths that had probably been there a decade. Piper wore jeans for the first time in months, and a white tee knotted at the waist. No one looked twice at her. She liked that. Atlas reached across the table, brushing his thumb along her wrist. "You look relaxed." "Do I? You didn't check your phone once during dinner." She glanced at her bag, where the device sat inside, buzzing occasionally with updates about a pending acquisition deal she was supposed to finalize by Friday. "I didn't want to." His gaze softened. "I like this version of you." Her throat tightened. "What version do you think I am?" "The one who laughs with her whole face. The one who eats too fast when the pasta's good. The one who doesn't seem to care what anyone else thinks." She swallowed. "I care. Maybe too much." His hand curled more firmly around hers. "I don't know what your story is, Piper, but I know you're not simple. And I don't need you to be." She looked down, letting the words soak into the quiet between them. For the first time, she didn't feel like a woman who had to hide behind her success or her money. She just felt like someone who wanted to be known not for her achievements, but for her heartbeat. After dinner, they walked past shuttered boutiques and glowing apartment windows. Atlas stopped in front of a mural painted on the side of a closed bookstore. It was a swirling sky of stars and rooftops, with a little girl reaching up toward a single, glowing lantern. Tess likes this one, he said. It's beautiful. She says the girl looks like her. She's not wrong. He turned to her. You want to come up? She hesitated. Not because she didn't want to, but because the moment felt heavier than she expected. This wasn't casual. Not for her. Yeah, she said. I do. His apartment was small, but full of life. A stack of children's books leaned against the couch. Crayon drawings filled the fridge door. A ballet slipper hung from a doorknob. He poured them each a glass of red wine from a bottle that had been opened earlier in the week. She didn't care that it wasn't new. It tasted like something real. They sat on the couch, legs brushing, the city a quiet hum outside the window. Can I ask you something? He said. Of course. Why'd you ask me out? That day in the elevator. She looked at him, surprised by the sudden vulnerability in his voice. I liked your voice, she said honestly. And the way you didn't try to impress me. I don't have much to impress with. You'd be surprised. He tilted his head. You ever gonna tell me what you do? She hesitated. Someday. Just not yet. He studied her for a moment, then nodded. Okay. She leaned in, resting her head against his shoulder. He smelled like soap and sawdust and something warmer underneath. She didn't know how long she could keep her secret. But right now, in this apartment filled with crayons and second-hand furniture, she felt more at peace than she had in months. And for the first time, Piper wasn't sure if she was falling for him because he didn't know who she was, or because he saw who she really was when no one else could. The first thing Atlas noticed when he stepped into the penthouse lobby was the silence, not the quiet hush of an upscale building, but the stunned, reverent kind that followed the arrival of someone important. He didn't belong here. The marble floors gleamed like mirrors. A crystal chandelier hung 2 stories high above him, catching the sunlight like 1,000 tiny stars. A concierge in a tailored suit gave him a once-over that could have peeled paint. Sir, can I help you? The man asked, posture stiff with assumption. I'm here to see Piper Ellington, Atlas said, adjusting the collar of his jacket. It wasn't new, but it was clean, pressed. He'd borrowed it from his brother. The concierge's brows twitched. Do you have an appointment? No, but she invited me. The man opened his mouth, clearly ready to dismiss him, when the elevator dinged. Piper stepped out, her heels tapping against the marble like punctuation marks. Her hair was swept up, her dress sharp, minimal, and undeniably expensive. Atlas felt the ground shift beneath him. She didn't look shocked to see him, but she did look braced. I told them to let you up, she said, her voice smooth but quieter than usual. Sorry about that. The concierge stepped aside like a curtain being drawn. He followed her into the elevator, the same kind they'd met in, except this one was wrapped in gold trim and smelled like imported citrus. She pressed the top floor button without looking at him. You said you wanted to see my world, she said after a beat. I didn't expect it to have a doorman who looked like he could run a government. Her lips twitched. He takes his job seriously. The elevator opened into her apartment. Atlas had worked in luxury condos before. He'd seen wealth. But this was something else. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around the space like a glass crown, offering a view of the entire skyline. Everything inside was sleek, curated, the kind of place where even the couch looked like it required a manual. A bottle of wine sat breathing on a counter that probably cost more than his truck. He turned, slowly. You live here? I do. This whole floor. She nodded. He exhaled, low and long. So when you told me you were in finance, I left out a few things. No kidding. She walked to the window, her reflection barely visible against the city beyond. I didn't lie. I just needed to be someone else for a while. And who were you with me? She turned then, meeting his eyes with something raw. Sane. Grounded. Real. He crossed the room, stopping just short of touching her. You think I wouldn't have wanted you if I knew all this? I didn't know what you'd think. Most people don't see me, they see the money, the name. You were different. I'm not afraid of who you are, Piper. I'm afraid you didn't trust me to handle it. She flinched. It wasn't about trust. It was about wanting something that wasn't built on expectations. It was built on a lie. No, she said quickly. It was built on truth, just not the whole truth. He looked away, jaw tight. Atlas, she said, stepping closer. You changed everything. You made me want more than just boardrooms and deals. I didn't even know I was lonely until you. He shook his head once. You have a world I'll never fit into. You already have, she said softly. He stared at her, trying to reconcile the woman who danced barefoot in the park with the woman standing in a penthouse overlooking the city. Then a knock sounded behind them. Piper walked over and opened the door to reveal a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and a warm smile. "Hi, I'm here for the fitting," the woman said, stepping inside with a garment bag. Piper's expression shifted. "I forgot that was today." The woman glanced between them. "Should I come back?" "No, it's fine," Piper said, hesitating. She turned to Atlas. "This is for a gala I have tomorrow. One of those appearances I can't skip." He nodded, but something in his eyes dimmed. The woman led Piper behind a divider, and Atlas sank onto the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees. From behind the partition, he could hear muffled instructions and the rustle of fabric. When Piper stepped out moments later, she looked like someone from a magazine cover. The gown shimmered with movement, the neckline elegant but commanding. She stood tall, poised, polished. He felt a wall slide quietly between them. "You look incredible," he said, voice low. "Atlas." He stood. "I need to go. Please don't." "I'm not angry," he said, heading for the elevator. "I'm just not ready to be wallpaper in a world I don't belong to." "You're not wallpaper," she said, following him. "You're the only thing that's ever felt real." He paused in the doorway, torn open in a way he hadn't felt since his divorce. "I'll call you," she said. He shook his head. "Don't. Not unless you're ready to let me see all of you. Not just the parts you think I can handle." Then he stepped into the elevator, and for the first time since they met, she let him leave without stopping him. That night, Piper stood barefoot on the balcony, the wind tugging at the hem of her robe. She could see everything from here, every tower, every light, every corner of the city that had once made her feel invincible. But now, all she felt was hollow. She'd built an empire. But in hiding who she was from the only man who'd ever seen her heart, she'd realized something she'd never allowed herself to admit before. Success didn't mean anything if you had no one to share it with. The knock on Atlas's apartment door came just as he was rinsing the last dinner plate. Tessa had fallen asleep curled up on the couch, her ballet shoes still tied to her ankles, a picture book clutched to her chest. The TV flickered on mute in the background. He didn't expect anyone. Not this late. He dried his hands on a towel and opened the door. Piper stood there, soaked from the rain that had started an hour earlier. Her hair clung to her face in dark, wet strands. Her coat was unbuttoned, her arms trembling slightly at her sides. "I didn't know where else to go," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Atlas stepped back without a word, letting her walk inside. She paused just past the threshold, glancing at the small apartment, her eyes catching on the framed photo of Tessa on the bookshelf and the paper rainbow taped to the wall above the kitchen counter. "I can't stop thinking about you," she said finally, turning back to face him. "About us." Atlas crossed his arms. "You walked away. I know. And I hated myself for it the second the elevator doors closed. You made me feel like a guest in your life." "I made you feel like a mistake," she corrected, her voice cracking. "And I've regretted it every hour since." He exhaled slowly. "Why now?" "Because I realized something tonight. I was supposed to be at this gala, black tie, rooftop, skyline views, all of it. I stepped out of the car and looked up at the building and thought, none of it matters if you're not at the top with me." Atlas looked away, jaw tight. "That's easy to say from your side. It's not. It's the hardest thing I've ever admitted. I spent years building a life where no one could hurt me, where I controlled every outcome, every risk. But you," she stepped closer, "you were the one thing I didn't plan for. And the only thing that ever felt right." Tessa stirred on the couch, letting out a quiet sigh. Piper's eyes softened as they landed on her. "I know I don't fit into your world," she said gently. Atlas shook his head. "That's not it." "Then what is it?" He looked at her, really looked at her. Mascara streaking down her cheeks, hand shaking slightly from the cold, voice raw from emotion. "You were never the problem," he said. "It was me. I didn't think I was enough for you. I built this life for my daughter out of scraps. You built yours out of skyscrapers." She stepped closer. "Then let's meet somewhere in between." Her hand reached for his, tentative and slow. He let their fingers intertwine. "I don't want a world without you in it," she said. "Not the penthouse. Not the boardroom. Just you." A long silence settled between them. Then Atlas nodded once. "Okay." A soft sound escaped her half-laugh, half-sob as she leaned into him. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close, the rain from her coat soaking into his shirt. He didn't care. Behind them, Tessa blinked awake. "Daddy?" Atlas looked over. "Hey, pumpkin." You're okay. Tessa rubbed her eyes. Is Pretty Lady staying for pancakes? Piper smiled, tears still fresh on her cheeks. Only if you let me help make them. Tessa nodded solemnly. But I cracked the eggs. You've got a deal. The next morning, the kitchen smelled like butter and syrup. Tessa wore a flower crown made of paper, and Atlas flipped pancakes while humming under his breath. Piper, still in one of Atlas's oversized flannels, stood barefoot at the counter, pouring juice into mismatched cups. The sunlight poured in through the window, illuminating the little apartment in gold. It wasn't a penthouse, but it felt higher than any skyline. Later that week, Piper did something she'd never done in her life. She turned down an award ceremony. When asked why, she smiled and said, I had a better offer. Pancakes and bedtime stories. She started spending more time at Atlas's place than her own. Not because she had to, but because it felt like home. She swapped boardroom dinners for park picnics and gala gowns for rolled-up sleeves and tiny paintbrushes, helping Tessa with her school projects. One evening, as they tucked Tessa into bed, Atlas pulled something from his pocket. A tiny, hand-carved wooden ring box. Piper's breath caught. I don't have a yacht, he said, or a private jet. But I've got a toolbox that's held together with duct tape, a 6-year-old who thinks you hung the moon, and a heart that's never fit with anyone else's but yours. She opened the box. Inside was a simple gold band, warm and perfect. I want a life with you, Atlas added. All of it. Even the parts one don't understand yet. Piper didn't hesitate. Yes. They married in the park where Tessa first called her Pretty Lady. No guests in tuxedos, no towering cakes. Just laughter, sunlight, and a girl tossing flower petals into the wind. Piper never stopped being successful. But now, every deal, every decision, every victory felt like it meant more because it ended with her coming home to the only two people who'd ever made her feel whole. And Atlas? He never stopped fixing things. But he didn't have to fix Piper. He just loved her. Exactly as she was. The sun dipped low over the Hudson, casting molten gold across the deck of the boat, gliding slowly through the water. Piper leaned into Atlas's side, her hand resting over his heart beneath the soft cotton of his button-down. The city skyline glittered behind them, but she didn't look at it. She looked at him. Atlas had surprised her with the boat rental to celebrate the finalization of her new foundation, an initiative that provided funding and mentorship to single-parent entrepreneurs across the city. It had been her idea after watching him balance work, fatherhood, and life with unwavering dedication. He never asked for help. So she built something that could help others like him. You know, she murmured, her eyes still on him. I used to think success meant never needing anyone. He turned toward her, his gaze steady. And now I know it means choosing the right people to need. He brushed his thumb gently across her cheek. You're not the only one who had to learn that. They hadn't had a traditional honeymoon. Between Tessa's school schedule and Atlas's contract deadlines, the trip had been postponed more than once. But this wasn't about that. This was a different kind of celebration, quieter, more intimate, and somehow more meaningful. Piper's phone buzzed inside her tote, but she didn't reach for it. Atlas noticed. You're not even tempted? Not tonight, she said. I'm not missing a second of this. The boat drifted past the Statue of Liberty, her torch catching the last light of day. Piper smiled, her mind unexpectedly flashing to the first time she met Atlas in that creaky elevator she used to co-own. He glanced toward the cabin. Tessa's out cold, by the way. Didn't even make it past the second storybook. She's been bouncing off walls all week. She's planning a puppet show for us tomorrow. She says we're not allowed to laugh unless it's at the funny parts. Piper laughed. That's oddly specific. She's oddly specific. Just like her stepmom. I take that as a compliment. You should. The boat slowed as the captain guided it into a private dock near Battery Park. Atlas helped her down onto the weathered boards, their hands still linked. A sleek black car waited nearby, but neither of them moved toward it. Instead, they walked slowly along the water's edge, the city quieting behind them. When I was little, Piper said, watching the ripples lap against the stone, I used to dream of running away to somewhere no one knew me, somewhere I could start fresh. Atlas looked down at her. Did you ever think that place could be someone instead of somewhere? I do now. They stopped at a bench overlooking the river. Atlas pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket and handed it to her. What's this? Something I've been working on. She opened it slowly. It was a sketch, rough but detailed, of a small single-story building with a wide front porch, flower boxes beneath the windows, and a faded wooden sign above the door. It read, Ellington and Monroe, a place to begin. What is this? She asked, her voice catching. A new community center. I found an old lot in Red Hook. Needs a lot of love, but it's got good bones. I thought maybe we could build something together. A place for people who need a fresh start. Somewhere Tess could run around barefoot and sell lemonade that tastes like dish soap. Piper laughed through her tears. This is the most beautiful thing anyone's ever given me. It's not a penthouse, but it's ours, if you want it. She folded the sketch carefully before throwing her arms around his neck and kissing him hard. I want everything with you. He pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. Then let's make it all. They moved into a brownstone in Park Slope a few months later, a place with creaky stairs and a backyard just big enough for a treehouse. Atlas added a tire swing. Piper added a reading nook. Tessa added glitter to everything, including the dog they adopted from a local shelter. Piper gradually stepped back from the glare of the spotlight. She still ran companies, still took meetings, still made moves. But now she did it on her terms. In jeans and sneakers, with peanut butter in her purse and paint on her hands from helping Tessa finish her volcano project. Atlas expanded his business, hiring a small team of techs and launching a training program for at-risk teens interested in trades. He said Piper was the visionary, but she always corrected him. You're the foundation, she'd say. Our whole family stands because of you. Every Friday night, they had family dinners at the new community center. Sometimes 10 people showed up, sometimes 50. Atlas grilled. Piper organized. Tessa bossed everyone around with a whistle and a clipboard. One crisp autumn evening, as they danced under string lights draped across the courtyard, Piper rested her cheek against Atlas's shoulder and whispered, I never imagined this kind of joy. Atlas kissed the top of her head. That's because you were aiming too low. No, I was aiming alone. He tucked her tighter against him. Well, you're not alone anymore. And she never was again. Not in boardrooms or beneath blankets during stormy nights. Not in laughter or in silence. Not in dreams or in reality. Because she'd found her home not in the skyline she built, but in the heart that grounded her, steady as stone, unshakable as love.